Hello and welcome. You're tuned into the best in paranormal talk radio. This is Beyond the Darkness. I'm your host, Dave Schrader. Along with me, my intrepid companion, Mr. Tim Dennis. Hello, Tim.
I don't drive an intrepid.
This is an exciting week for us.
It is.
And an exciting show. Mm-hmm. And I wanted to do you proud, Tim. I wanted to make sure that I was up on our guest today.
Oh, good.
Because, you know, I'm not nearly as adept at conspiracy theory as you are.
Well,
and our guest is here to talk conspiracies with us.
Right.
But I was looking, I wanted to make sure I gave the right introduction for a guest like this.
Good.
You know? And I reached out to a friend of ours online, a listener, a follower, and a friend online who goes by the name of the Blue Meanie. Tim.
Right. Yep.
And he said, just make sure, treat the guy with respect.
Yep.
Treat him with the kind of comforts he deserves.
Right.
And make sure that you get the bio right. So he told me I should make sure to hit all the high points.
Okay.
And if I miss any, you'll have to fill me in. Okay. But ladies and gentlemen, today, joining us on Beyond the Darkness, you might recognize him from his role on The Cosby Show. Huh? And then he went on to Disney, of course, where he starred in the TV show That's So Raven. And then
Dave.
What?
That's the wrong Raven.
Blue Meanie wouldn't do that to me, Tim.
No, I think he did.
Are you sure about this?
Yeah, that's not the right Raven.
It does get a little hazy in here between That's So Raven being a teenage black girl into a very famous professional white man pro wrestler. But I'm not here to question people's abilities.
I would question Meanie at this point. That
really?
is not the right Raven.
Damn you, Meanie. What kind of conspiracy is this? Yeah. All right, Tim. Well, then you get the pleasure of introducing him.
Well, let's just say that this Raven is a two-time ECW champion.
Okay.
He is a one-time NWA champion, 27-time WWE hardcore champion, the host of The Raven Effect on the Jericho Network and Podcast One, an all-around great guy, and one of the most...
So he was involved in the NWA?
No. I know which NWA you're going for here, my friend. No, we're still not talking about...
Oh, okay.
Yeah. And known as one of the most creative and brilliant minds in the world of professional wrestling, and by gosh, in society.
Is that according to him or according to
according to
everybody? Everybody.
So,
no kidding.
Unless he's hung up on us, let's introduce at this time the host of The Raven Effect on Jericho Network and Podcast One, the one and only Raven.
Raven.
Hello.
Hey, welcome to the show. Good. How about yourself?
Good.
Good. It's great to have you join us today and kind of cross-pollinate each other's shows.
I was getting confused because I didn't know I was a young black girl when I was earlier in age.
You can understand my confusion as well then. But I took the Blue Meanie's word for it, and obviously I was sorely mistaken. Hey, it's great to have you here. And Jericho and I were chatting, and he goes, "You have got to talk to Raven on the show. This guy knows conspiracy theories, and he's got some brilliant thoughts and ideas on this." And being the fact that we are kind of a fringe element show with the paranormal and we cross over into conspiracy theory from time to time, I knew it would be a great marriage to bring you on board and be a part of the show. And you're right down the pipeline for Tim here as a wrestling fanatic and a true believer in conspiracy theories. I thought it'd be fascinating to bring you on this evening and kind of have an open dialogue about this. I want to know, though, coming from your background and everything, at what point in your life did you start looking into and researching conspiracies and the possibilities behind them?
Well, I got to think. Probably around the first time Ancient Aliens, the TV show, came on.
Okay.
Wait, no, it's got to be before that. No, it's before that. When was that? That was about 6, 7, 8 years ago.
I think it's been a little bit longer than that at this point, but yeah, around there.
Yeah, I guess it was probably, I think I was in WCW when I started fancying myself a conspiracist. Because I would always tell Jericho to call me Raven Spooky Mulder. And and then Jericho, who had never watched the X-Files, had no idea what I was talking about. And eventually he became a huge fan of the X-Files and knew exactly what I was talking about. But, but I really got into it with the Ancient Alien show. And I got, because it's just so many fascinating things. And as far as conspiracy, well, let me think. well, like 9/11. That's absolutely that was a bank robbery. They robbed the gold bullion from underneath at the Federal Reserve. And stuff like that. How can you not be? But then
whoa! I gotta ask you about that. Hold on a second, Raven. Now, to me, that's an intriguing aspect. One thing that you don't know about me, I also did not play a young black woman on the Cosby Show, but in my past, I was involved in collectible gold and silver markets. And one of the things that we sold, we had 9/11 coins and gold and silver from the vaults that were underneath the World Trade Centers, because what a lot of people don't know is that the world banks were there. There were many different styles, many different currencies that were held there. And when it happened and the melting took place, a lot of the precious metals and gold were destroyed or melted down. We had many of the coins that had been affected or survived the attack and had been certified as having come from the World Trade Centers. As a matter of fact, you can find them online. They've got they're certified by PCGS and NGC, two of the top coin grading companies, as coming from the WTC 9/11 World Trade Center incident. And to me, that was always a fascinating aspect of this, but I'd never heard that it was a bank robbery gone awry.
Well, it was the Federal Reserve. I mean, the Federal Reserve was located directly underneath the buildings, and then there's it wasn't highly publicized, but it was publicized, and you can fact check it. But a shit ton of money was a shit ton of probably billions of dollars were missing after 9/11, and obviously it couldn't have happened. If it would have happened before 9/11, we'd have known about it, and it couldn't have happened after, because then, the whole thing sunk into the ground. It's a big crater.
Well, I know that part of the idea behind 9/11 was in destroying the Pentagon was to wipe out, because here at the Pentagon where they kept those records, Tim, do you remember what the amount was? There was some insane amount of money that had gone missing.
$2 trillion.
Yeah. Yep. Under Cheney, was it Cheney?
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. And he was getting ready to come up on charges. They were really starting to look into this. And then the planes hit the buildings, hit the Pentagon, which, again, a lot of people claim it was not a plane that hit the Pentagon. There's no footage. There's nothing.
Well, think about this for a second.
Uh-huh.
It is the most secure building in the world, and there's not one camera trained on it. That's mind-boggling. Of course, there's tons of cameras trained on it. And the only reason they haven't released any footage of it is because it wasn't a plane, it was a missile. Not only that, but if you think about it, how did the people burn up so that there was no recognizable bodies, but passports survived, made out of paper?
Right. Well, I guess it just depends on where those were stored as opposed to where the people were.
No, on the plane. I'm saying
on the plane, right.
Plane of the passengers. Supposedly, they found passengers' passports from the plane, but the people burned up where there was no people. The people were incinerated, and there were no people found. There was no bodies found in the Pentagon from the plane, but they found people's passports.
Yeah, that does have a strange ring to it, doesn't it?
Yeah, it would imply that passports are more durable than human bodies.
Yeah, I don't know. I don't know what the flammability of the passport and the type of paper that they use on that. But I get your point. I mean, that's definitely an intriguing aspect of this. But and I'm sure because it just gets muddled into all of the conspiracies that surround 9/11, the idea that it was a bank robbery gone bad. Do you believe that was to help cover some of the deficit issues from Cheney's?
Not so much so.
No?
I think it was more about the let me see if I can remember this exactly, because my memory is too many chair shots and too many drugs in the 90s. There was you know what, if I try to explain it, I'll bollocks it all up. So let me just leave it at that for now. But what I was going to say before was that the problem with having conspiracy theories is then there's people like that believe in flat Earth, think the Earth is flat, and they give conspiracists a bad name. Or Alex Jones, who's just ludicrous.
Let's jump into flat Earth for a second here, Raven, because we have had flat Earth represented on our show on Darkness Radio before.
Oh, then please tell me what how they actually can even believe this. Explain to me their theory. I mean, how it works.
I got to tell you, first of all, and I'll preface it by saying this. It was one of our most controversial shows that we had back on Darkness Radio, in that it was polarizing. It was either people really bought into it, such as the Shaquille O'Neals of the world, or it was one of those shows where people emailed us and said, air that crap again, and I swear to God, not only will I stop listening, but I'll come find you. It was that polarizing. Now, the way that they would justify it, you would get the horizon line. That's the most argued point. Now you tell me, as someone who's traveled, hundreds of thousands of miles throughout his career, when you get up in an airplane, what's the first thing you see? Do you see a curvature to the earth, or do you see it flat across as you travel?
The earth is too big to see any curvature. That's a ridiculous theory.
But in a flat earth scenario, or flat earther would say, well, of course, you don't see the curvature of the earth. It's flat. Now, the other thing they tell you is, well, why? And it has to do, again, with airplanes. And this is the next thing that they tell you is, well, okay, why do I have to, when I fly from, let's take the city we're in right now, Minneapolis, and I'm flying to, let's say, Philadelphia, okay? If I'm flying from Minneapolis to Philadelphia, I can fly nonstop, of course. But why sometimes do I have to go from Minneapolis to Dallas-Fort Worth to Philadelphia? Why am I going way out of the way to go to Philadelphia? Now, you and I know that there's such things as refuels and other reasons for airplanes to go to a different city.
And because of it also, I think it mainly has to do with getting passengers from one place to another, and they have certain routes they have to follow because it's more conducive to them making money.
Right. Now, what a flat earther would tell you is, well, the reason being is because you can't get directly from one place to another in a flat Earth scenario. The way that the globe is set up,
easier.
Well, I don't know if you've ever seen a diagram of the flat Earth. The way it looks like a big pizza pie. In this pizza pie, you can technically fly across the United States. Okay, and in that, I'm trying to think of a good way to put this to you. There are certain ways you can fly that would be shorter, and certain ways you can fly that would be longer to certain cities. But what they're saying is you have to take that stop. I'm trying to think of how this plays out again from the show.
But hypothetically, that point is demolished when you just show another airline that doesn't make the stop.
Right, when it goes nonstop. The other thing too, right, and this is the other argument against a flat earther that came up a lot, is we had some people who were in the military that called and were marksmen or sharpshooters, and they said, you know what? Every time that I have to plan to take a shot, a long distance shot, I have to plan not only for wind speed and direction, but I have to plan for the curvature of the earth. Yeah, before I take a shot. And
yeah, I was explaining that to somebody the other day. It's not you. It has to be a long shot. I mean, it's got to be a super long shot. 500 yards isn't enough. But those guys that take those mile-long shots or whatever the border is to how long a bullet will fly, they absolutely have to factor that in.
Right. Now, the thing about, and this is what gets me, but it seems like it's a very polarizing issue with flat Earth. It is either people buy all in, or people are very much broken up by it.
It's a ridiculous theory, but I got to tell you, as a sidebar, I was listening to this podcast yesterday called Ancient Aliens Theorizing, and I guess it's about these guys that theorize about ancient aliens and stuff like that, and they were talking, and somebody had written them a letter, I guess, that Australia was completely a work, that there's no such thing as Australia, and and that it's not even on the map, and it was absolutely hysterical. And that's basically the flat Earth. I mean, it's the same stupidity.
I've heard that theory too. That and I'm trying to remember who came up with the theory, but yeah, that there's no Australia. What was the other thing too, Dave, about Antarctica? There's something about Antarctica.
Well, that's the hollow Earth theory.
Yeah,
Admiral Byrd supposedly flew in there, found this pocket universe that was up there.
And then supposedly there is no, you can't get to the exact North Pole because I'm not sure why, but that's another one of those theories that there is actually no North Pole, which is idiotic because there's a magnetic North Pole and there's a true North Pole.
Now, the other parts of the flat Earth theory too is that gravity is artificially manufactured.
Wait, I just remembered the key to the no Australia theory is that when they took all the, I guess, 168,000 people from England, and they were going to, the prisoners and the convicts and all that they were going to make Australia into a penal colony, that they instead drowned them all. And that's what led to and so 168,000 people are missing, are dead. And and now they have people with fake Australian accents to cover it up.
I buy that. You can't trust it. It's got to be New Zealanders behind it.
You think so?
Yeah, I would think so. Damn Kiwis.
Now, but here's the thing, Raven. Here's what I find fascinating about people who, before they had heard flat Earth theory, were firmly behind the globe theory. Let's call it the opposite of what it is, the globe theory.
Well,
and that is that they hear the flat Earth theory and they go, you know what? I can kind of buy into that because we have received emails and we have received correspondence from people who say, you know what? The guest that we had on, and the name escapes me right now, but the guest that we had on, people listened to him and he was very coherent. He put together a very cohesive argument. People listened to him and went, you know what? Hey, look, I can buy into
26% of the population approves of Trump. So there's loonies in every batch.
Don't hold back, Raven. How do you really feel?
but I still don't get. Okay, how do they explain so spaceships never went up? We never sent people up into space, and the pictures they take of the Earth are just a marble.
Well, the idea was that really the only picture that had ever been taken from space was 1968, I think it was. And that was the only one, and it's been the only one that was used up until like 2013. And in today's environment, with all of the satellites and all of the things that we've had up there, why has none of them telegraphed a new picture of Earth from that vantage point? There's been stitched together pieces, there's been this and that, but they've never done it. I thought, to me, it was one of those kind of throwaway episodes where it was fun, and I like to open up to possibilities and consideration. And when you hear this guy,
Mark Sargent was his
Mark
name.
Sargent.
Yep.
It makes you sit back and scratch your head and go, you know what? I don't buy into all of this, but there's some really intriguing aspects of this that make no sense.
Really?
Yeah, and
but what are the intriguing aspects? Okay, I would find it fascinating to listen to this guy, but I just can't think of a piece of evidence that he could possibly say that could even make me even consider it. But I'm not closed-minded. I mean, I'm open-minded to anything, but just one piece of info that could
we'll
possibly
hook you up with this guy, and I'll see if we can get you a copy of our past interview, because I got to tell you, that was about a year and a half, almost 2 years ago.
Yeah.
And much like you, drugs in the 90s and too many metal chairs to the head. I can't remember every point that was made that made me stand back and scratch my head. But it was like the whole puzzle on a whole really kind of intrigued me. But I understood it was so funny because we've talked JFK, we've talked 9/11, we've talked all these different weird conspiracies out there. And, even did Elvis, did Michael Jackson, did Paul McCartney, fake their deaths or really die? And people are genuinely intrigued. We received massive hate mail from the flat earth people. And then on the other side, we received email from people who said, I saw the title of this and thought you guys were batshit crazy. And I downloaded this episode, and holy God, this guy's onto something. And you're like, really? And it's fascinating to me how you can see these different angles and prospects to it. So that's what always draws me in, is why to you is the idea of a 9/11 bank robbery a feasible aspect, but the flat Earth theory is something that we throw out completely, and there might not be something logical to it.
But I'll give you a couple of reasons.
Sure.
One, because billions of dollars were missing from the Federal Reserve afterwards. Two, World Trade Center 7. The building wasn't touched by anything, and then at 5 o'clock, it just decided to fall down on its own. I mean, that alone, that is enough evidence right there. Just not even the bank robbery. Let's just say that that we had something to do with it, or that it was a con job. Is the fact that World Trade Center 7, a third building that nobody ever talks about, a third building went down that was not hit by anything, did not catch on fire, nothing happened to it, and it just went down.
All right. Talk to me about this, because you mentioned the fact that there are all this money that went missing. And again, please accept my request for ignorance here, but because I don't know all of the different stories behind this. Where is the credible information regarding the loss of all this money from the Federal Reserve? And if it really happened and this took place, why is that not played up more by the media?
Because the media is owned by corporations. I mean, it's not the Fourth Estate anymore like it used to be when my dad was a journalist. Back with Watergate and Woodward and Bernstein. I mean, the free press was free then, but now all papers are owned by a corporation. All news companies are owned by a corporation. So it's not hard to imagine that there's a kill order placed on it. But I don't have. This is my problem. Is I don't have enough memory left to cite specific examples of where I read that the money was taken.
Right. Well, that's where it gets intriguing to me.
Sources.
Right, because I'm looking, and, just in Googling, which I know you can't believe everything you read online, just Googling, you look up 9/11 and missing money, and first of all, the $3.2 billion or trillion dollars in Cheney's deal pops up. I've only found a couple of mentions of the WTC 9/11 biggest gold heist in history, and they're coming from sites that I don't know that you'd necessarily consider
right.
Good press. And where did they get the information? The reason I ask these things, we had a guest on our show, Len Kasten, a number of years ago. Very nice man. And
he's the guy that says that the Serpo mission.
Right. And we had him on the show, and we're fascinated by that. And Planet Serpo.
Sure.
We're doing this foreign exchange student policy. We send them astronauts. They send us astronauts. We do all of this information. And I asked, well, where did you come upon this? And he found a leaked document from the CIA. And when I asked, or CIA or FBI, one of those deals, I said, where is there something on there, like a file number or an official stamp or something that we can actually trace to say this is definitely a file that fits in there? And he said, well, no. And I said, well, how do you know that this isn't just some document? Because I can go online and fake a document and put it up. And he said, well, his answer was something, and I'm just paraphrasing it, of, well, why would people put false things on the internet?
Oh, of course. But I didn't get it off the internet, though.
No, I know you didn't, but that's what I was asking.
But I know what you're saying. Yeah. I know what you're saying. But I read this from legitimate footnotes, bibliography sources. It's also, I'll give you another example. When Reagan was assassinated, did you know that John Hinckley Jr., his father, was a partner of George Bush's in Zapata Oil, in an oil company that they own?
No, I did not know that.
Did you know that? And this is also you can look this up. This is bibliography. This is sourced. That John Hinckley's company was being audited. The auditors showed up to his office. And while they were there, and he was claiming to go get the books and whatnot, his son attempted to assassinate Reagan. In addition, you know who had a meeting with Scott Hinckley the next day? John Hinckley's brother, Neil Bush, George Bush's son.
Okay, but with that now, Raven, I got some questions about this, because I know this is one of your hot button conspiracy theories that you like to talk about. I was reading up on a little bit about it, and here's the questions I have, because when you go down the line as far as who the Republicans had at that time, let's say H.W. Bush decides he wants to off Reagan and he wants to be president. Okay. Mm-hmm. Obviously, the Republicans don't have a lot of candidates at that time in history that they can put forward for the presidency. And by history, and by what we look at history, Herbert Walker Bush was the next candidate in line for the presidency anyways when Reagan was done with his 2 terms.
I didn't say that he killed him. I'm just saying.
No.
I didn't say it was what I'm saying is that's a lot of weird coincidence.
There is. There's a lot of weird coincidence there. But the way I look at it, and there's a book out there by Roger Stone that was released beginning of 2016, where and it's called Jeb and the Bush Crime Family, I believe, where he cites a lot of what you're talking about. And he's talking about there was 2 shooters in the Reagan assassination attempt. I don't
know about that.
You don't know about that?
No, I mean, I didn't follow that one closely. I'm just saying, but there's a great example of stuff that's bibliographied and sourced. Newspapers, many newspapers printed this, but most of them didn't. Mm-hmm. That is really, lends itself to make you go, huh? And it sounds absolutely, completely batshit crazy, mm-hmm. but yet that's true. It's like, George H.W. Bush was also a director to CIA, so he was a master of dirty tricks. Back when the CIA was doing dirty business.
Right.
Allegedly.
I'm just saying. Look, I didn't go into it in depth, but I read enough on it to know that it sounds very weird. It doesn't sound. And I just don't trust coincidences.
I hear you, but follow me on this.
Okay, sure.
With that, as you cited, Herbert Walker Bush at one time was the head of the CIA. His political ties are deep. His father's political ties are deep. And in that,
he was a Nazi. Prescott Bush was a Nazi,
right? And in that, it's allegedly. Only Dave's going to keep throwing.
Not allegedly. No, he's a proven because he was a board of directors of AG Farben.
And in that, it's only a matter of time before Herbert Walker Bush is going to run for president, A, and B, eventually become the Republican nominee because it's...
But how do you know he's going to win?
But, okay, I'm going to take you down the conspiracy theory road here. It's a given. It's a given because the guy who once ran the CIA, the guy who's probably got the shadow puppets and power behind him, is going to work the system to become the Republican nominee. It's a matter of time. So if he's got this supposed power behind him, if he's truly got this shadow government behind him and has this accumulated power behind the scenes and was powerful enough to tell Alexander Haig to take a hike when Reagan was shot, isn't it a forlorn and foregone conclusion that why even take a shot at Reagan? Because
I agree.
He's going to have power eventually.
That's very confusing to me. In fact, it makes no sense. The fact that he yelled at Alexander Haig, though, proves nothing because Haig is only Secretary of State, which
right.
In the line of succession, the vice president would be next, not Haig. So Haig saying, I've got the office, or whatever he was quoted as saying,
right,
what just showed he was a madman. But my point is, I could never understand why Bush would do that if he did that. Yet, on the other hand, why it's really weird that John Hinckley's son, who was in business together, was in Zapata Oil with Bush, was also part of the Dirty Tricks team that sent to train for the Cuban Missile Crisis, the Bay of Pigs, that helped train the people for the Bay of Pigs, and also his son has a meeting. They were also his company was being audited the same exact day, and the very next day his son had a meeting with Neil Bush,
now
John Hinckley Jr.'s brother. I'm saying so. Yeah, I don't want to think that. I think it'd be idiotic of HW to try to assassinate Reagan. Yet that's a lot of weird parts.
So especially to me, the part that I find really weird is his brother had a meeting the day after. You think at that point they would separate themselves for a while because they'd be like, "Holy crap, my brother just tried to kill the president."
It was scheduled.
Oh, scheduled. Okay, all right.
Now I'm not sure if they ever actually had the meeting because I can't remember. But it was scheduled. That I do remember.
The one thing that Roger Stone did cite in his book was...
Now, is this the same Roger Stone that the Dirty Tricks Roger Stone that he was on Bill Maher a couple weeks ago?
I think it might be. It might be. The thing that Stone cites in his book is that HW and Reagan had different foreign policy outlooks and philosophies. And he's saying, and this is just according to him, that Bush's outlook on the foreign policy was that he eventually wanted to go to a one world government. This is the problem I have to it. The entire philosophy is that HW had 8 years to turn this entire thing into a one world government and go Illuminati style on the bit if he really wanted to. And it never happened.
Well, he only had 4 years. I mean, he was only president one term.
I'm sorry, 4 years. 4 years, not 8 years. But he had 4 years to go Illuminati on the bit, and he never did. And he could have asked his brother to do the exact same thing, and he never did. So, you know, if to say that he had a problem with Reagan for not taking us down that road, so he was going to off him and try and take over the government to take us down a one world or a new world order type. And I'm not talking Hall and Nash New World Order type scenario.
What about Hall and Oates?
Okay, Hall and Oates I'll take, because I do kind of like Hall and Oates. I'm not going to lie. To take us down that road.
She's a rich girl, and she's gone too far, even though it doesn't matter anyway.
Oh, good God, we've jumped the rails.
Good thing Jericho's a singer and I'm not.
Yeah. Although I would entertain you as the head singer of Fozzy. I'm not going to lie.
Thank you.
But, you know, just to say that Herbert Walker would off Reagan just to get his way, to me seems kind of out there.
You're preaching to the choir. Look, I'm totally with you on that. I don't make any bones about that. But then other stuff is kind of like 9/11. Why did they, when they scrambled the jets? Why did they wait? Why did Cheney wait 30 minutes to scramble the jets? Why did they only go half speed? Why did Bush, W. Bush, why did he sit there and read the goat for 8 minutes instead of the goat, the book about the goat, and then stop and just sit there for 8 minutes? To me, if it was a terrorist attack, first thing they do is get the president to safety and not let him sit in front of a kindergarten class. Not only that, but then,
well, to me, that's public relations. If suddenly you run in, grab the president, duck his head, and pull him out of a class full of little children, that could have freaked a lot of them out. And at this point, they didn't have enough information to know exactly.
But they did have enough information. They did. They absolutely know a plane flew into it.
Right. They knew a plane. But years before, that guy flew the ultralight into the Empire State Building, which was an accident. That was a true accident. So, you know, at that point, I think what they were trying to do was contain everybody, keep the president doing what he needed to do to keep the PR angle down till they could confirm that this was.
But they knew at that point, when they called him, they knew it was a terrorist attack because they knew from the airlines when the airlines were being hijacked. Not only that, but do you know where you were when you first heard about 9/11? I can tell you exactly where I was.
Yeah, I can as well. Sure. I had stayed home with a massive migraine that day.
Why can't George W. Bush, he's told 3 different stories of how he saw it or how he heard about it. First, he claimed he saw it on the plane going to the tower on the news, which is impossible because there was no footage of it yet. It hadn't aired. It didn't air for another half an hour or an hour after he knew. I mean, you know, he plays a good old boy and all, but you can't be a complete idiot and be president. You know, even Trump is as big a schmuck as he is. He's not an idiot. You know, he's a bright guy. He's insecure. He's egotistical, but he's a bright guy. You can't be. You have to be somewhat bright to be president. It's probably why Rick Perry could never be president. But how could? He's the president of the free world, and he doesn't even know where he was when. That's a bunch of crap that he doesn't know where he was, how he heard about 9/11 or how he saw it or how he was first informed. I mean, that's just ludicrous. And he's told the story so many times, and each time it's different.
We have to take a break. We'll be back. We've got more Raven, more looks at conspiracies. When we come back, I'm curious if there's ever been a conspiracy that Raven was following down, believing, and then something flipped the switch and made him realize how preposterous that sounds. We'll talk about that. We'll talk about other conspiracies when we return. We have to take a break. We'll come back. We've got more with Raven right here on Beyond the Darkness.
Beyond the Darkness.
Hello, welcome back. This is Beyond the Darkness. I'm your host, Dave Schrader. Across from me, the drooling and WWE fan, Tim Dennis.
Not just WWE. I'm going to tell you right now, straight up, been a fan of Raven since early ECW.
Yeah, when he was
I'm talking original ECW. Show? No, not the... Would you stop it with that? I know for a fact.
Right.
The only thing that this Raven and the other Raven have in common
is they could both kick my ass.
Well, there's that.
Okay, there's a second point. Yeah,
there's a second point. They might have had the same hairstyle at one time.
Really?
Just saying.
They kind of had that dread thing going on, the 90s grunge dread.
Yeah.
Did that happen?
I don't know. We should ask him.
Raven, tell me that ain't true.
Are you sure I wasn't a black girl on the Cosby Show?
See, Tim? See? He doesn't even remember.
Maybe it's the hair.
Drugs in the 90s was a hell of a thing.
Yeah, it was. Yeah.
Hey, speaking of, I need to know the answer. Is it true that at the top of the Illuminati pyramid, it's Vince McMahon?
No, I doubt that. I don't even. I'm not.
Nah.
I'm not so big into the.
No, I know.
I'm not a conspiracist. Like, I don't think everything's a conspiracy. I have my pet choices, but I don't just jump on bandwagons to jump on them. And I guess you said before you were going to ask me about if there was something. What was it
has there ever been a conspiracy that you started to follow and it really made a lot of sense to you, and then all of a sudden something jumped the tracks and pushed you off of that theory?
Yeah, I mean, recently, like I was listening to a podcast, and this guy was talking about he'd done a lot of research, and that he was saying that Lee Harvey Oswald was actually a double agent when he tried to go get recruited by the Russians, which makes a ton of sense to me.
Right.
And then that was one of the big takeaways I got, and also that Jack Ruby was also on the FBI payroll. That he was that Hoover had that there was some dialogue, that there was documents proving that he was on the payroll for Hoover, J. Edgar Hoover. And I really liked this. I'm like, man, this sounds really intelligent the way the guy explained it. And then I went to look it up because I started watching that new thing on the History Channel about the Kennedy assassination, and I was like, wait a minute, I couldn't seem to find any verification of this. So I'm like, now I'm kind of disappointed that because I like the idea of that Lee Harvey was I like the idea that he's a double agent, that he really was a patsy, and that he was a double agent for America, and that he was just trying to become a double agent against Russia by trying to defect, as opposed to just being a schmuck.
Right.
So. I don't know. I don't know what to believe.
I'll tell you what, Raven. Let me put you back onto that track. Judith Very Baker was, I think, I'm still going to go with Tim. I mean, we've had a lot of great celebrities on the show and a lot of fascinating people. But
Judith Baker, JFK.
Right?
Did she sleep with JFK?
No, she slept with Lee Harvey Oswald.
Yep.
Judith Very Baker, and she has the most fascinating tale to tell. And the first time we got a chance to meet her, she was kind of on the run. And she came live into our studio to do the show. And I thought, this woman is so full of crap. And I sat there staring at her while we did this interview. And I will tell you, Raven, I left that interview feeling a completely different sense of what actually occurred at the assassination of JFK. And it wasn't because this woman was trying to sell a book. She was so physically affected. As a matter of fact, on our True Crime Tuesday show, we might put up a replay of that soon on Patreon so people can hear it, because I think it's one of the most powerful episodes we've ever done. And it really digs deep into this mythos of who Lee Harvey Oswald was. And the fact that here's this guy who's a defector. Here's this guy who's this public enemy number one. He's all this. Yet when they catch him, he's got his Marine rings on. He's I can't remember all the bits. I mean, there was so much information she gave us that night, but it's all information that she didn't make up. You can actually find for yourself as part of history. That's what fascinated me about her story. And she made a comment.
Wait, let me just interject real quick. And to me, if he was what they claim he was, that he wanted to see the president dead, and that he also did it for the fame and whatnot, why would he claim he's a patsy? Like, it makes no sense.
Right.
You wouldn't claim you're a patsy if you're trying to take credit for the by all accounts he wanted to take a credit for it, for the assassination. So why would you claim you're a patsy? So that totally ties in with it.
Right. And the fact that what I thought was so interesting about this is, as this story evolved in front of us as we're talking to Judith Very Baker, what she believes happened was that Oswald got word of the assassination and tried to get word to Kennedy and his people, and then realized that the people he was reporting to were in on this. And he basically told Judith Very Baker at the time, I'm in trouble. My number's punched. They're coming for me soon because I did this. And he was trying to save the president in passing the information on. She's fascinating. If you get a chance to read her stuff, take a look at it. And then there's the book, Dr. Mary's Monkey. Have you ever looked into that, Raven?
No.
I'm going to send you the links.
Honestly, I have 50 to 100 books on alternative history.
Right.
Mine are mostly to deal with alien type stuff.
Sure.
I do have a handful about, pretty much the gamut, Jim Mars's stuff.
Right. Well, Dr. Mary's Monkey is fascinating because it gives you, it's kind of JFK-ish, but that's not the main focus of the story. Instead, it's finding out about the vaccinations that we were being given and how they were killing us and poisoning us, and how Lee Harvey Oswald worked for this woman as well as Judith Very Baker. I mean, it's a really compelling story, but it's outside of the JFK realm. It's its own thing. But I would suggest that I want to mention, too, for people that are just tuning in or checking out the show, the Raven Effect podcast is also part of the Jericho Network here on Podcast One. Raven hosts the show, and tell them, how can they find you? How often is the show coming out, Raven?
It's on we have new episodes every Monday. Make sure you subscribe. Podcast One or Apple Podcast, which is really iTunes, but
right
now they're calling it Apple Podcast. It's been upgraded, I guess. And but yeah, check it out, especially if you want nonsense and malarkey and you're a wrestling fan. And if you're not a wrestling fan, there's
come
so
for the
much
nonsense and malarkey right.
That you'll love it anyway.
Yeah, and that's every Monday, the Raven Effect podcast. It's a lot of fun. And Raven has been known to go off territory and talk about other topics besides wrestling, folks. So in the first 8 episodes, you'll hear a myriad of different topics. And, of course, he does dip into the world of wrestling as well. Yes, Tim?
I do want to throw Raven a little bit of a gift here. In the first couple of weeks of the Raven Effect, Raven, you were looking for somebody to talk Oak Island with you. My friend, you have 2 people here willing to talk Oak Island with you.
Oh, tremendous. And my fans will be so disappointed it's not on my show. So,
well, we can always come on your show and talk Oak Island. I'll let Tim unleash on that on your show because he is an Oak Island fanatic.
Now, I got to ask you. Okay, go ahead.
Go ahead.
Okay,
I got to ask you, what's your thoughts on it?
Here's my thoughts, and I'll make it very succinct and very quick. There might have been something at Oak Island, but we had Jordan Bonaparte, who lives up in British Columbia, is the host of the Nighttime Podcast in Canada, and he is one of the foremost authorities on Oak Island on the show. He's been on twice in the last couple of years, and Jordan and I have gone back and forth about Oak Island. He truly does believe that Oak Island was never a source for pirates. It might have been a source for pirates. He doesn't believe it was so much a recreation of Solomon's Temple by the Knights Templar, but he really does believe that it might have been a treasure trove for the lumber industry, and that the money pit that is there might have just been a storage, for lack of a better term, for a lumber outfit.
Well, here, let me say this. I don't know what I think about that, but I have to digest it. But let me say this. Here's what I don't get. This boggles my mind. Why don't they shut off the box drains? That, like, the first thing I would have done was get a ground penetrating radar, found the box drain, and then shut it down, and just put rocks there, or whatever, or put a bunch of metal or something to shut it off, so no leakage. Then you have no water, and then you have no flooding into the tunnels. I mean, why have they not done that?
I thought part of the reason is because of the internal structure. When you remove the water, you remove the pressure, and because of the way the ground is, and that's such a soft area, that by removing all the water, it might collapse in on itself,
right,
and be useless.
And if that truly is built like Solomon's Temple, if it's got 12 chambers, if you remove the water and there are booby traps there, like if it is a recreation of Solomon's Temple, like Dave said, that entire thing is going to collapse in on itself. And if there's anything in there that's hundreds of years old, like speculated, and is breakable or will crumble, you'll lose whatever treasure you have there if it's not metal.
Huh. That's okay. That answers my theory, because that always puzzled me. I'm like, why wouldn't they do that? But the other thing that always puzzled me too was the kids that first found it. They saw a light on the island, and then they went and saw a thing hanging over a hole. Like, it's such a shady story. You know, I mean, if it wasn't backed up by the fact that every 10 feet there's lumber, you know, there's wood, whatchamacallits, pylons or whatever.
Oh, yeah, the pilings, yep.
In the ground. But why? Okay, because there was a light. So does that mean that nobody would have went there otherwise, and nobody would have saw whatever was hanging over the hole? I mean, it's a really shady entrance point.
It is. And in that, too, I believe, why am I blanking? Our friend Scott Walter has said, too, that there are markings up there that would suggest, including the hooked X, that would suggest that maybe there was some Knights Templar and or pirates that would have been involved in burying something up there at Oak Island. But you know,
here's the conspiracy. I think there's absolutely nothing there, and these guys are trying to recoup money by doing a TV show.
That's just what I was going to throw out there. And Raven, I'll second Dave on this. I don't think there's been anything up there for maybe even a couple hundred years, because if you notice, when you watch this television show that's centered around Oak Island, there's a lot going on there, and there's not a lot going on there. They're throwing money into it, but they're not throwing a ton of money into it, because
not until the last season. The last season they threw a lot of money at it.
Right, but the whole thing is they don't want to throw so much money into it that they won't ever be able to recoup the cost of it, because they're not going to. I don't think there's anything there.
Let me ask you this: is it just me, or is which one's Rick? And Rick's the older brother, right?
I believe so.
Is it just me, or is he starting to become sort of a heelish character? He's starting to become kind of annoying.
Yeah. Well, you got to play the role for TV too, I guess.
But he was he was the ultimate baby face when the show started, and now he's kind of whiny and kind of like, you know, when they were digging the hole that Dave guy picked out. Hey, it's your hole, Dave. There better be something in there. And even though he was kidding, he wasn't kidding. You know what I mean?
Well, that's called dramatic effect. I don't know if you guys have heard about that in wrestling, but sometimes you gotta create a little tension. You can't just be all kumbaya, holding hands, and then going and beat each other up. You gotta build that storyline.
Well, and in truth too, if it's a shoot, if they're really spending their own money, which I don't buy, but if they're truly spending all of their own money, and you're really out there digging holes and spending your own cash. And I'm sure you can relate to this if you're promoting your own show, and you're paying for the show. You better be drawing an audience to pay for the show. Otherwise, you're spending your own money for nothing. And if he's digging a hole out there, he wants to be sure. He's got to be sure that there's something at the end of that hole.
Yeah, I know. I'm just saying he just seems to be getting kind of snotty over the years. You know, in the last season or so. And
I think he knows the truth too.
What's that?
I think he knows the truth, too.
Or he might just be coming, you know, you get that excitement and that belief. It's kind of like buying into multi-level marketing. At first you look at it and you think, I could do this. This is something, oh my God, there's really opportunity here. And then you start sinking money into it. And then you realize, holy crap, I'm just spending money to have my friends spend money so that they can, you know, pay me back. And I think maybe that's what he's realized, is that he's he's
not even sinking the money. He's sinking his brother's money.
Yeah.
But I think maybe he's gotten to the jaded point.
Let me ask you something else. The Scott Walter guy. Yeah. I had to stop watching it. No offense. I mean, he must be a nice guy in person, but I had to stop watching his show because everything was, I did this, I found this, I did this, I, me. When I found this, and it got to the point where I was like, I can't listen to him anymore.
Well, you know what, though? The guy is hyper intelligent and plugged in, and he follows a lot of loose thread leads that a lot of people have given up on. So I think, he's touting it as in, look, I can find this. You can find this. We can work together. He brought us a really interesting point. The guy is a forensic, God, what the hell do they call it? Geologist, right? Forensic geologist. And he said he had pieces from 9/11 that were sent to him for evaluation. He can tell us in his own words, without any concern, that yes, it was the jet fuel that brought down the buildings, because he knows how buildings are built and the structural integrity of the rock and masonry that was used to build these buildings. And you hear him, and he makes a really compelling argument for the fact that there was no bombs going off inside the building. There was no other story. What happened was these planes hit. They're burning so hot, so fast, so furious that it's screwing with the structural integrity of the girders and the supports and beams. And once you start messing with it, it's like a game of Jenga. Once you've removed one or two pegs, it starts to cause this horrific effect, and it can crumble. So you look at the 9/11 prospect through the eyes of a forensic geologist, and suddenly, he gives a really compelling version of how it could have come down because of the planes.
Where do you stand?
That's why I asked you if there's ever been a conspiracy that you kind of flip-flop on, Raven, because doing the show, and I'm going to be honest with you, Tim is the conspiracy guy here. I drive myself crazy because I get OCD, and once I start picking that scab, I got to keep digging. And the fact of the matter is, either way, it's scary as hell to me. And I'm not trying to live like an ostrich with my head in the sand, but there's just some things I just don't want to know. There's just some things that I just can't keep digging at. And I've heard amazing stories on both sides explaining how this would work, why this would work, why it wasn't. And you sit there and you look at all of it and you're like, oh, yeah. Okay, this makes me feel better. Scott Walter made me feel better. This terrorist attack was a terrorist attack. It wasn't inside. There were no bombs in the building. And then you start looking at other aspects and you hear some other experts, and you had on the investigative commission when they were talking, the guys are like, this building cannot come down like it did unless there are internal explosive built into the building or stationed, because, and they explain, yes, the jet fuel will render these parts of the building inoperable and problematic, but the way the building collapsed is not the way that it would have done that. So then you start, you're like, wow, what the hell?
The terrorists, they barely knew how to fly a charter plane. I mean, a little rinky-dink plane, and then the guy's making a perfect right turn or left turn and a diving swoop angle into the Pentagon. There's no way a professional pilot would have a hard time doing that.
Right, Pentagon. But again, Pentagon is the one aspect of the story that is the weirdest to me, because, like you've said, here you've got one of the most important buildings in our government, and it's got some of the most beneficial and important secrets. And in the current age, nobody's watching. We don't have cameras from every angle recording what's going on and being the information being sent to some offsite location in case of an attack like that. And the footage looks intriguing to me. That maybe we were hit by a missile.
And then see all the information that you were talking about at the Pentagon was also at World Trade Center 7. That's where a lot of the offices were held.
Right.
Where secret, where government files and stuff like that was at, and which was another reason why World Trade Center 7 went down, even though there was no fire. I mean, to me, your Pentagon, that to me is World Trade, is the Building 7 is just as is overwrought with complete impossibilities. Same thing. We
started riffing on that. Again, let me just make a quick mention. The Raven Effect podcast, you can hear every Monday on Podcast One, or you can find it on iTunes or Apple Podcast, whatever it's called at this point. Do me a favor. Our many legion of Beyond the Darkness radio followers, check it out and make sure that you go and rate it and review it on iTunes and Apple Podcast, because that goes a long way to help propagate and spread his show so that more people can find it and listen. And you do us that favor, help one of our brethren here on the Jericho Network, and do the same thing for his show and any of the great guests and speakers that you hear on the Jericho Network. Go ahead, Tim.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
I got to know, Raven, I know why I believe Bigfoot is one of the more believable paranormal phenomena out there. You were citing before about having read Lloyd Pye's book and why you now believe Bigfoot is one of the more believable paranormal phenomena out there. Tell me why.
It's his whole theory of the fake tracks. Apparently, because there are tons of tracks, and tracks are an actual science that are used in courts of law to convict people. Footprints, tire tracks, and Bigfoot prints. When there's every one print you could fake easily, but many prints, when it's across a snowy area or a muddy area, and there's print after print after print, there's almost no way to fake it because in his book everything you want to know, everything you believe is false, I think it's called, or something like that. And in it he explains how, first of all, you'd have to make the boot, because each print has a certain way that it steps into makes an impression. You'd have to, first of all, make these great boots. Second of all, you'd have to be able to have a 7-foot guy, because the prints have to be far enough apart, 1 foot from the other foot, and Bigfoots are like 7 foot tall. So you'd have to have like Shaquille O'Neal. The weight that he would have to put into sink deep enough because they know how deep a footprint is. They can tell you exactly how much somebody weighs by their footprint in a mud or in snow or whatever. So they would have to have somebody let's say they took Shaquille O'Neal, who weighs 300 pounds, and a Bigfoot weighs 800 pounds. So Shaquille O'Neal, who'd be one of the people tall enough, would have to have a 300-pound barbell on his back, and then he would have to step and walk across a snowy area or a muddy area. But here's the thing. You don't want to make it – you have to make it somewhere hard to find because they're not easily found. But if you make it too hard to find, then nobody's going to find it. And if you make it too easy to find, then no one's going to believe it anyway because it wouldn't make any sense. And there's also a bunch of other stuff that escapes me at the moment.
You know what I find fascinating? You talk about the prints, right? And the big breakthrough was the dermal ridges.
That's what I was looking for.
That to me was a fascinating aspect of this. But here's the one problem I have, and literally just having this conversation with you, Raven, inspired my brain to work, which is very rare. But here's the problem I have now with taking prints. What is our first reaction when we see a print? We want to take a picture of it. We want to put something down next to it to show perspective, and then we fill the print with plaster, and we want it to go bigger and outside the principles of just the step itself. Here's my thought: if this thing is large, it's walking in these kind of areas, and it's doing this, why are we not digging up like a piece of sod? Why are we not digging the print up, removing the entire print so that we can get a full measurement, but take it back? Because there are going to be cells left in the print from the skin that DNA should be able to test to prove this is human or this is animal.
I don't know. I don't know if it's too hard to dig it up. I don't know if
how hard should that be, right? See, I think sometimes we overlook the most simple idea. And I think we should give Lauren Coleman a call.
Let's say you're right. Why can't they dig it up? But then again, you're going to have to dig up. A Bigfoot print is probably like 1.5 feet long, and it's probably about 8-10 inches across. So and how deep do you go? Do you go like 1.5 feet below to make sure you don't disturb it? I mean, it's a pretty big piece of sod. You're trying to, not screw up by digging them with a shovel.
Right,
not to say you're wrong.
I would say that would be better for me than a big plaster of Paris foot, which looks really fake and goofy to me at this point, taking it in and trying to get viable cells from it, especially if it's a relatively newer footprint. There's probably a better opportunity. Now, again, it could be tainted because other animals walk in through that stuff, but I would think that would be one of the better opportunities to do some serious research and study.
I don't doubt that. I don't think you're wrong. But by the same token, then you see the photographs and the prints, you see photographs like through a muddy area where there's, like 8-10 prints in a row. And then they do that, the plaster, but first they take the picture of them. And how does anybody make these prints believable? Right. I agree with you. I think that's what they should do. But then go and taking the other side of the coin, how do you make the prints believable enough? I mean, if you're faking them, it's
right.
it's almost virtually impossible, because also the way the ankle is on a Bigfoot, it's in a whole different part of the foot. It's like forward like an inch or two. It's like in the center of the foot because of their shambling flat-footedness. And so you have to have, not only do you have to have somebody like Shaquille O'Neal with 300 pounds on their back making these footprints, but he also doesn't have the right foot structure to make them.
Right. You had a question, Tim?
Well, I just kind of wanted to follow up, Raven, with the fact that, okay, so you've got this species that's out there that, as you stated, physically can't be human in order to make these prints. So if it's not human, what do you believe Bigfoot is, according to what you've read from Lloyd Pye, and you've formed this opinion of Bigfoot being something other than human? What is Bigfoot, in your opinion?
I think it's the end of the line of, like, you know how they say we were descended from apes. I think that's where the line ended at Bigfoot's, and I think we are alien hybrids that were whether you believe the Anunnaki story or whatever. But I think that and Pye gives a lot of believable evidence to show why it makes no sense that we would be just the Darwinism. Darwinism is such a false theory. It's ridiculous. And even Darwin said that if you can't find a missing link, then the theory's bogus. And they've never found a missing link. They've never found something, and they should have by now. But so I think that's where the Australopithecus and the Cro-Magnon or whatever, I think they evolved into the Bigfoots, and then we were the hybrids from the Cro-Magnon or the Neanderthal, or I don't know.
Well, here,
I'm not completely 100% on where I sit on the whole subject, but I really think that I mean, it's funny, the Anunnaki story that Zecharia Sitchin, but it ties into history, like with mitochondrial DNA. When he says that the hybridization occurred is goes back to right around 190,000 years ago, when all people are descended from like one person through mitochondrial DNA.
All right. And that's a fascinating touch. And then that kind of lends itself into the whole biblical aspect of, one man, one woman. And we've kind of propagated from that. Not that I'm selling the whole theology of that religious aspect, because there's too many holes and flaws in that ointment for me as it is. But I'm curious if there is this conspiracy aliens, I understand, because here you've got some kind of being that may or may not be able to come from alternate universes, parallel realities, or outer space. They may be able to fly over our property, turn on and off our nuclear facilities. They may or not be abducting our people and doing all kinds of weird scientific testing. I can understand. And understand when I say that, I can understand. I'm not advocating it, but I can understand hiding that from your people because you have no way to control it. And by accepting and saying out loud, yes, we're being visited, it opens up for a world and everybody says, oh, we're prepared for it. And I do think we are to a degree. But every time there's a fly in the ointment in our country and around the world, people react like moron animals. And I'm not just talking about one race. I'm talking about everybody.
I think where you're going is, and I hate people that go, why don't they tell us the truth? Why don't they let us know for real what's going on? Because we can't handle the truth.
Sometimes I agree with you on that. But now what about the Bigfoot angle? Why hide Bigfoot from us? Why deny that Bigfoot exists?
I don't think they found him. But think about this: pandas were in the exact same position as Bigfoots in up to the 1830s, 1850s.
Same with gorillas, right? Same with gorillas. Gorillas have only been known for 150 years, proven that they exist.
And not only that, but Lloyd Pye illustrates a great point about how the parts, there are so much of the earth. Like 30% of the earth is a viable area for them to live in that we don't even go to. So it'd be very hard to find one because of the location. It's part of the reason they never found panda bears for so long and thought it was a myth, was because they lived in uninhabitable areas. But eventually society explored through it. but there are so many parts of the wilderness, and it's always those parts of the wilderness where the Yetis are and the Sasquatches and the Bigfoots. And apparently in Russia, like they've actually done they've been in science. The Bigfoot study has actually been in scientific papers, peer-reviewed studies. And I'm sure you've read about that, right?
Right.
Yeah. So, I mean, I just think it's a matter of that they live in a place where we don't go, and the odds of finding them are pretty slim. I don't think it's a huge species. I mean, look, there's only 1,800 pandas alive,
Right. Right. Yeah. It could be a very reclusive grouping of creatures that are very adept at keeping themselves cloaked. And I don't even mean sci-fi cloaked. I mean, they just know how to work the wilderness. And, the sentry stories have interested me, that they work like sentries in a military group. They're set out, and some of the whoops and knocks you'll hear is them alerting their pod that there are humans near the area, and they'll just back out of areas while you're coming in. They're backing out, and that's why you can never catch up with them, because they're always one step ahead of you because of the sentry positions.
I never heard that, but that's fascinating.
Yeah.
And they're nocturnal, so they're much more inclined to be. So they come out when we go to bed, in the dark.
Well, you mentioned earlier how you think flat Earth theorists can really throw a monkey wrench into real conspiracy theories. What do you make of shows like Finding Bigfoot? Do you think that that screws the real Bigfoot evidence and real Bigfoot research up? And I'm not trying to slight on the guys. I like the guys from that show. We've had Bobo on the show a few times. We're going to be hanging out with him in Michigan at the Michigan Paracon later this year. But do you think that hurts the field more? Because, you've got guys like Bobo who are considered to be the quote unquote expert in this. Yeah, Bigfoot loves raves. Yeah, Bigfoot loves burgers. Yeah, Bigfoot loves porn.
I'm not familiar with that show. But I will say this is you must have I would love to sit in for a week. I'm not trying to ask for a spot, but I'd love to sit in and listen to some of the guests you have. Oh my God, it must be fascinating to listen to the point, counterpoint, and all the strange and intelligent and weird and wacky stuff you must listen to.
Hey, Raven.
And be able to ask questions and query and parb and back and forth.
You want to sit in and listen. It's real easy. If you go to Podcast One, you can just subscribe to our show and listen 5 days a week, Monday through Friday, and it'll be like you're right there.
I'm saying to be actually to listen to it, like to be there, like
all right, I'll tell you what, Raven.
Come on up.
What we'll do is now I hear tell you make your way to Minnesota once in a while. Is that right?
Yeah.
All right. Well, I'll tell you what. Next time you find yourself Sasquatching through Minnesota and lumbering around, give us a call. We'll bring you in for a day of recording, and you can be our special guest commentator, and you can interview the guests with us.
I'd love to. It's funny. I was one of the first guests I tried to get, and I was supposed to have him, but then his schedule got changed. Was Dr. Joseph Farrell.
Mm-hmm.
And you know what I'm talking about, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, he's written like 24 books. I was so excited. I had so many questions I wanted to ask him, because what a fascinating, whether you believe anything he writes or whether you don't or believe half of it, the guy's a brilliant writer and fascinating. And I was so excited. And then it was like, we couldn't get him. And then we stopped doing the guest format anyway, because it worked out better, other than, we bring in Billy Corgan into Smashing Pumpkins every month because he's a good friend of mine. But
name dropper.
So no, I would love to. Next time I'm in Minnesota, I will absolutely take you up on that.
Sure. Otherwise, we can work it out too. We'll bring you in sooner. We can do this through Skype and have you join us for some interviews. So let's just find a date that works. And I'd love for somebody to kind of weigh in with us on these shows. Speaking of the paranormal and the strangeness, you've had a chance to be and see many places around the world, Raven. Have you ever had a ghostly experience?
No, I never have.
Okay, good night, everybody. Thanks for being here.
A flying saucer UFO experience, though. It's not the greatest one, but it was really weird. I was outside walking the dog,
mm-hmm.
and I looked up, and there was this star, planet, plane, whatever. It didn't seem very high in the sky, so I don't think it was Venus, but it might have been. And there was 3 little dots around it. So, I mean, it was like a bright dot and 3 smaller dots. And I kept looking at them like, that's weird. They're not moving, because I kept thinking that at first I thought they were a plane and then something else. I don't know. And then after a while, after about 5-10 minutes, I took the dog in and I came back out and they were still there. And I'm like, man, I bet that. And then it dawns on me, like, even though I'm into aliens and UFOs and all that, never thought of that at first. I just thought it was just a weird anomaly. And then the light that I thought was the UFO just stayed there. But then one of the 3 smaller dots just started moved about, like, from where I was standing, what would it be 100 yards from me, so I don't know what that would be in space, a mile, 5 miles, whatever. This light moved that had been stationary next to the brighter light. It had been stationary for 10 minutes, moved across the sky and stopped. And I was like, holy crap, that's a freaking UFO. The one I thought was a UFO wasn't a UFO, but the small light that I thought was just a star must have been a UFO, because nothing would hover at that height. The only thing that hovers is a helicopter. And the only thing that and then it moved. So it's either it was either a star until it moved. Or I don't know. I mean, that's the only explanation I have.
Fascinating. I've had an opportunity to see some amazing lights in the sky and have some really weird experiences myself. So that it just keeps us going. That's just what I love about doing this kind of job and all the people we get to talk to.
Have you seen ghosts?
Yes, on numerous occasions.
Really?
Yeah.
Like, can you tell me? Can you tell me?
Oh no, I'm sorry. That's another $1.99, Raven. That's part of our pay-per-view podcast.
I listen to you guys. I'm dominate my podcast listening, but I have so many interests that I can't.
Right.
You know how it is.
Right.
And you guys are 5 days a week.
Yeah, we've got, we both had experiences and have seen some things. I've seen full-on shadow apparition in Louisville, Kentucky. I've been out in Savannah, Georgia, investigating at the Sorrel Weed House, and have had some really bizarre encounters there. My grandmother came to visit me after her passing.
Really?
Yeah. And I've seen, I've also been on episodes of Ghost Adventures, where we've had some unbelievable activity take place. I've been on about 7 episodes of that show. Yeah, and we've been lucky enough to capture it. As a matter of fact, I did an episode of Paranormal State in, I think, season 2. It's called First Contact. You can look it up on YouTube and Netflix and stuff, but it's called First Contact. And I take them UFO hunting out at the Trout Lake ranch of the Issetti Ranch out in Trout Lake, Washington. And we actually capture these lights on camera moving through the sky and responding to us as we're signaling to it. So,
wow.
Yeah, we've had a lot of great luck.
You, I believe. Now, it's funny. It's like when people say they're abducted or whatever, I never believe them. When people say they see ghosts, I never believe them. But I believe you because I know you. You know what I'm saying? Like, I don't believe most people because I don't know them. But if a friend told me that they had some kind of experience, I would believe that. But, none of my friends have had, weird or wacky experiences. But that's fascinating. I always thought those ghost hunter shows were just bogus.
No, I can tell you, I've been on the set for Paranormal State and I've been on the set for Ghost Adventures, where I've filmed 7 episodes. I was also the lead judge on a TV show called Paranormal Challenge, and was there to witness this stuff. And I never saw any shenanigans behind the scenes. I wouldn't have stood up for it. It would ruin my credibility. So
sure.
We actually, as a matter of fact, did an episode I was very proud of Ghost Adventures 2 years ago, where we went to this house in Seattle that was supposedly more active than, the damn Amityville horror house. And we didn't get anything. And they aired the episode showing we didn't even get a dust particle to blow past the camera. So, yeah, I'm fascinated by the fact that show, to me, every time I've been on it, what you're seeing is exactly what happened in the order it happened. Some of the things I follow and I understand, some things I don't. But it's, we should get you out. I'll tell you what, we're going to be out in Liberty, Missouri in July at the Oddfellows Asylum, the Belvoir Winery. You should get your butt up there, Raven, and do a little ghost hunting with us. We're going to have an event going on. We've got some people. Come on out there and hang out and do, see what's going on. Plus, if there's no ghosts, there's great wine on hand. So you can check that out.
I don't drink anymore. I had to retire. I got too good at it.
Yeah. Once you hit that apex and you've won the belt, right, it's time to give it up and let the younger kids handle it. I appreciate that. Well, come on out, be a part of that with us and have some fun.
I will.
I'll send you off air. I've got a really interesting piece of video footage that I captured at the Belvoir Winery. And
I'd love to see it.
We were down in the basement. And for listeners that are new, they may not have heard this, but we were down in the basement of the nursing home area where the morgue was, and everybody was focused into the morgue area. And I was standing there with this group of people, and this little woman standing next to me goes, "Dave, there's something behind us. I can sense something behind us." And I have one of these SLS cameras that you see on the Ghost Hunter shows, where if you point the camera and it can pick up a physical formation, you'll see it mapped in like a stick figure. And I turned around, and sure as hell, there's this stick figure standing right behind us in this room. And at first I'm thinking, I think I'm getting an effect from the furnace system. I think that's what it's looking at, and it's misconstruing it. Because if you look at it, you can see kind of the outline. And I thought, oh, this isn't real. And I said, okay, if you're really there, raise your arm. And it lifts its arm. And then I go, wow. Whoa, did you guys see that? Do that again, please. If you can, raise your arm like I'm doing right now. And all of a sudden you see its arm go back up in the air. And it was interacting with us. Yeah, so it's... I don't know. Some things you can dismiss as tricks of light and problems with the eyes. Other things, there's just no way you can wrap your head around, because once you see it and you're experiencing it, it's really astounding. So, we'll get you out. We'll get you out and do one of these events with us, Raven, and have a good time.
I would absolutely love it.
Great. Well, we'll talk about that off air and see what we can arrange. But we'll also talk about having you come on the show and sit in with us once in a while to do some episodes and
I'd love to have you guys come on as soon as I'm sorry.
We're kind of big shots. I don't know.
Wrestling-based show.
Yeah, we're kind of well-known big shots. I don't know if we've got time to appear on your little podcast, Raven, but no, we'd love to. It would be our pleasure to show up, maybe around Halloween or something. If you want to bring in some fun, spooky effect, we'll be happy to join back up with you and do that. You can check it out for yourself, the Raven Effect podcast on Podcast One. It's got about 8 or 9 episodes or more out right now, right?
Yeah, I think we're on 11 now.
11, fantastic. So if you love wrestling, you love entertainment and shenanigans and malarkey, you want to check out the Raven Effect podcast on Podcast One, part of the Jericho Network, our brother in podcast arms. So go check it out, or you can subscribe for it on iTunes, now known as Apple Podcast. And please make sure that if you listen to the show and like it, you go on there and you review it and rate it so that more people can find out about it. If you tune in and don't like it, shut up. Nobody asked your goddamn opinion anyway.
That's right.
How's that? Is that good, Raven? A good way to pitch it?
I love it, man. You could sell ice to an Eskimo.
Well, Raven, have a safe week, and thank you for joining us. We'll be back tomorrow when we talk about the enigma of Rosalie, Harry Price's paranormal mystery revisited. It is a ghost girl, Tim, a naked ghost girl who died.
Is she single?
And no, she's like 12. You don't want to do that.
Oh, sorry.
It's a creepy, weird story with all kinds of Twilight Zone twists and turns, and it's a real tale. We'll be talking with Paul Adams tomorrow about that. Nick Redfern joins us. We're going to talk about secret societies, histories, rites, and rituals behind some of these, including murderous plots, Tim. And then we've got Avea Bell Moon, who's going to join us on Friday. Spiritland is the name of her book. We'll talk about some of the ghosts of California's Central Coast and some of her paranormal experiences, Tim. She has been called by ghosts, has had voicemails left for her by ghosts, text messages by ghosts. She's got a lot going on. We're going to have to dig into that and find out that story later this week. Plus, a brand new and very personal true theater of the mind will be coming up from my life. My aunt and my life will be sharing a paranormal experience that really kind of kicked off my interest in the paranormal, and very interesting. And since it was Mother's Day, I thought this would be an interesting deal, since it deals with my grandmother calling my aunt after her death and visiting me. So we'll cover that on Theater of the Mind this Friday. And don't forget, tonight, True Crime Tuesday, we're back. Lords of the Harvest, a true crime investigative memoir. T.A. Powell, my guest. And this story is unbelievable. You want to stick with this one. And as a matter of fact, as soon as we wrap up the show, stay tuned, because we'll play a little snippet of that show for you so you can hear what's on True Crime Tuesday. We're going to do that next, right here on Beyond the Darkness. Lords of the Harvest, a true crime investigative memoir. Our guest for the evening, T.A. Powell, is a spiritually motivated investigative forensics author. Now, were these murders taking place?
7 actual kills.
Right. Were they taking place in any kind of pattern? Were they every other week? Were they every other month for a while? How often was this man killing?
Well, here was the thing. You had, say you had the first one on October 21st, 1977. Then you had October 25th, 1977. Then in December, then February, and then again in April. And what we discovered was there was a celestial pattern that was being followed.
Oh, really?
In the beginning, you don't, it's not a recognizable pattern in the beginning. But once you look at all of them, then you would notice that there were things that were happening on full moons and waning moons. And there were several other components to pattern behaviors with each one of these. That was very interesting. Say, the majority of all the women had some sort of blunt trauma or whatever to the left side of the head, which is traditionally a cult thing. But there was something else that was really incredibly interesting about this, and it's such an oddity, and it was odd in fact that they didn't pursue something greater with this. But then you have to remember, we're talking about 77, we're talking about 78, you're talking about the rarity of any kind of cultic kind of knowledge or perception. So no one would recognize these particular traits, but being that I'm a bit of a freak about Freemasonry also, I found this one of the things that was very curious is that you had the majority of these women had cracked or bruised or broken sternums. And the reason why they did was because the killer would climb up on their chest as he was strangling them manually.
Okay, now, to hold them down while he was doing the strangling? Theoretically?
Yes, but it was more than that, because seriously, you have a man who's 185 pounds or whatever, and you have, 77 or a 78 or a 90 pound, half-blind lady, such as Florence Schleibel was. That's not a great feat.
Right.
Okay? So it wasn't necessarily, you'd think, oh, this is for physical prowess, this is for this is for that. But when you look at it from a ritualistic standpoint, the interesting thing that you understand about this is that a great many of the MOs you can also find, like in the Book of the Dead, Egyptian. You have, in all of these cases, you had ligatures. But you had multiple ligatures, like 3 ligatures, okay? So they were being, strangled with scarves, multiple pieces of, like blind cord, etc. Always in 3s, which of course is ritualistic in and of itself.
So wait, each victim would have multiple ligatures on them?
Yes.
Okay.
Okay. So, like, you would have strangled with a nylon stocking wrapped 3 times about the neck. Then the next one, strangled with a nylon, 3 times around the neck. Then you have the next one, strangulation, same thing, stocking. And so you look at these, and then the next one is strangulation with a scarf, and that was, of course, Kathleen Woodruff of Coca-Cola fame. And so you go through all of the MU reports, and you look at all of this, and you notice all of the patterns, and then you notice the anomalies, and you look at those. And so what I was able to determine was the cracked sternums and everything. Obviously, it was because the killer was kneeling on the chest, but there was something very odd about it, because then you had one of these women who actually survived, because a neighbor, they had set up an alarm system so that if something happened, she was able to press a button by her bed and alert the neighbor. And the night she was attacked, she did so, and she was able to fight off the individual until help, sort of arrived.
Subscribe now for True Crime Tuesday by visiting darknessradio.com and clicking the True Crime Tuesday banner. Never miss another episode of True Crime Tuesday and Dumb Crimes and Stupid Criminals. Go there now, darknessradio.com, and click on the True Crime Tuesday banner. Do it now.